Hi, David here, bringing you a new treasure from the Papa PhD vault. My conversation with Joe Makkerh. This was episode 2 of season 1 of the Papa PhD podcast, and it is such a powerful one, so I hope you'll enjoy it. Happy listening. Welcome to Beyond the Thesis with Papa PhD, the podcast that delves into the diverse and impactful roles scientists can play beyond the lab. With me, David Mendes. By the end of grad school, your project has brought you challenges, victories, failures, obstacles, successes. You may have experienced excitement, frustration, exhilaration, anxiety, satisfaction. You've asked questions, tested hypotheses, studied, discussed, but one question may remain unanswered. What comes after? In this episode, you will be meeting a guest that has deep insights to share about going through your graduate studies and about his transition to the job market. Welcome to the show. So today, I'm going to be interviewing Joe Makkerh, who describes himself as a former scientist. So he has a PhD. He'll tell us about what it was. Now working in high-end audio. He transitioned from researcher to academic administrator to MBA student to business owner. And in his words, perhaps the journey is not yet over. Let's see what he has to say.
Hi, David. You kind of summarized what my journey has been so far. I grew up in England and did my undergraduate at Cambridge with natural sciences. I started off doing mathematics and physics and ended up being a cellular molecular zoologist. And then I came to Montreal for the first time, and at the EMBL in Heidelberg did some research there on viruses and arthritis in Montreal. Went back to Cambridge to do a PhD on nuclear localization signals, which how proteins get into the cell nucleus, and we had a pretty pioneering lab there. And then I came back to Montreal because I loved this place so much. Did some more arthritis research as a postdoc at the Shriners Hospital, and then really found my calling in neuroscience at the MNI, which is where we met. And so I did a postdoc there with Phil Barker on the growth factor, and that segued into a job in industry where I was researching anti-pain molecules and antagonists to NGF, nerve growth factor. Company was shut down by the venture capitalists, even though it was doing very well, and I eventually went into academic administration, where I became the first program administrator of what is now the McGill graduate program in neuroscience, the IPN integrated program in neuroscience. Yeah. So, and then from that, eventually that job ended, and I stayed as an academic administrator, now transitioning from science to being the interim assistant director of the MBA program at Concordia. And at that point, I realized, hey, this is a great program, and I need to be more savvy about the business world. And so I went from being assistant director of the program to being one of the students. So I finished my MBA 22 years after my PhD, just last year. And in between that time, a hobby of mine became now my primary career, and I now work in making computers for high-end audio. Okay, so I haven't put that really very well, but that's approximately the journey, and we can talk about how these things came about, I guess, at some point.
Cool. What's your company called?
It's called Batis Audio, and it was a company that was founded in Montana. And I took over the company, I guess, a year before my MBA ended, while I was doing my MBA. And I'm on very good terms with the former owner, who's still kind of helping out. He keeps coming out of retirement like a boxer.
All right, that's a very interesting path you have there. Very, I'm sure that if you go 20 years back, you could totally not predict all of the turns that happen and the doors that open to get you here. So
Exactly.
it's
Yeah.
very cool.
Yeah, there's lots of people and stories behind every transition, and I actually missed out. I even missed out a couple of those in the story. But yeah, there are people, of course, and I had no clue that I would be ending up. In fact, I as if somebody said I'd be a business person, I would think they were on crack.
So I'm gonna now ask you some questions about the beginning of this path, because one of the questions and one of the themes that I want to cover in this podcast is helping people who are right now transitioning, either finishing a master's or a PhD, and or having just finished, and that now feel that they're going to transition to something else. So, and because we all, I know that taking these are very very large undertakings, a PhD especially, but even a master's, and they have challenges at times, and you may feel lost. So the first question I would like to ask, and I know it's far, like you said, 22 years before your MBA, right? So I would like to know a little bit about the end of your graduate studies. Was it easy to find the motivation to complete them?
I would say it was not easy to find the motivation to complete them, but as so often happens in life, it was something I was compelled to do. I had so this was in England, where the PhDs were very short of duration, 3 years, and the first year and a half yielded nothing. So I had a year and a half to get all my research done and produce a thesis. So what happened was I had already started working as a postdoc in the same building in a different department at the University of Cambridge, and part of my condition of employment was that I get my thesis finished ASAP. So yeah, so it was an incredibly hard time because funding had run out. I had to work and write up my PhD at the same time, as well as try to look after myself a little bit and do everything else that we're supposed to be doing to look after ourselves. Yeah. So yeah, it was difficult. I didn't want to work as hard as I did, but I had to, and I found the energy somehow.
Excellent. So I imagine a lot of our listeners go through the same issue. I certainly can totally identify with what you're describing. What attitudes would you say accompanied you and guided you to finish and then to bring you to where you were today? What would be a guiding principle you could share with our listeners?
I think there are a couple of things, right? One is, and I think as graduate students, people get quite good at this, is submitting to the fact that something has to be done. That you're just going to have to get down to work and get through things.
So resilience, you would say?
Yeah, it's resilience, but also not resenting. Just not resenting that this has to be done, or even if you are resenting, just accepting that some things, that sometimes you have to work above and beyond. When there's no help available, when you're in the lab and there are the lucky people, there are the hardworking people, and there are the hardworking lucky people, and the people who, are just working hard, but they don't get anywhere. And to an extent, your luck is created by you too. But so there's the resilience, and then there's also something else that I think has helped at every turn, but is also still a curse, right? Which is coming back to that period when you're finishing your graduate studies. I think a lot of students tend to feel this constant feeling of guilt if you're not working. I should be working. So whether it's a weekend, late at night, there was always this feeling of guilt. I must be working. I must be working. I must be working. And in some ways, that's helped a lot because I transition into a person who's very dedicated to their work. But at the same time, I think it blurs the distinction between where you end and your job starts. And so you become your job, which is great at first, but it can take a big toll on one's health to have that kind of attitude, not to mention relationships and so on. So with all things, there's a positive and a negative, and you just got to navigate and best use the positives and not go into the negative side. But finding that balance is very difficult.
So it's very, very interesting what you're saying. So let me ask you a question based on that. For the sake of the people who are listening and who are now finishing and maybe struggling, would you say that now, all these years after, do you still carry the bad with you, or have you now sublimed all of it and are just using the good?
I would say, to be completely honest, that I'm carrying the bad with me. But the difference is that as I get older, and I should have been able to do this a lot longer ago, I'm more able to recognize the bad and do something about it slowly. But yes, it is something that it stays with you unless you're very aware of it. I just took my time to become aware of it, and that's why I think podcasts like yours help, in forewarning people to really put their health first, above all. And I know it's a cliche, but we need to hear it.
For sure. And what I'm hearing is, and tell me if I'm wrong, try and be able to separate emotion in those moments from the objectives and move on step by step. And years after, you're going to keep from that experience of finishing such a hard project, which is the case in these types of studies. You're going to keep some knowledge, some tools that you can then use to be a better professional, etc., etc. Am I hearing right?
Yeah, I guess that's a good summary of it. What I mean to say is that everybody has different objectives. Your supervisor has different objectives to what your objectives are. We should always think about our own objectives, keep those in mind. Do not ignore other people's objectives, but be able to see where the common ground is and use that, right, as the look at where your objectives and the professor's match. Look at what your life objectives are and follow that. My warning, I guess, is to say that don't let somebody else's objectives become your sole purpose of being, which at late stage graduate studies, it can be that, or during the graduate studies when you've got papers to write and a thesis to submit, whereas doing work in getting your professor publications is an important thing. That's where your objectives are aligned, but you've got to keep moving forward, not just allowing others to move forward and not yourself.
I agree. It's and for sure this is one of the questions that is going to be that we'll discuss a lot in this podcast, because I feel that you can easily, when you get, it's like Frodo, in the Mountain of Doom. it's especially the last few miles are a very hard trek for a lot of people. Again, like you said, they're the lucky ones, like you said, and it's hard sometimes to compare yourself with someone in the bench beside you that's just publishing left and right. But it's a path that you need to walk, and that you end up winning. The thing that I feel, and especially looking at you and at what you've achieved since, is that the result, the suffering that you feel at that time, especially at more at the end when there's pressure to finish because the funding over, etc. It feels like it's unsurmountable, but then it's over one day, because that's what happens. You publish whatever you have, you defend, and then it's over, and then you can take a lot of good things from the experience you had, and it'll follow you. What you learned will follow you throughout your life. You have skills that you maybe do not suspect that you gained throughout that ordeal, let's say.
Absolutely. There's a lot that there's a ton of stuff that you learn. You learn, like you said, resilience, right? You learn to think under pressure. You learn to problem solve. You network and you make friends that will be your friends, but could also be useful in the future to get you to the next step. Like I said, in every transition, there was a person or a story to go with it. And all of these, you sow the seeds during your graduate studies. So that's absolutely a very important point. And as the cliche goes, it gets better. Even 10 years after my PhD, involved in, I was still in academia at that point, but I very rarely thought about my PhD days at that point, except for all the lessons that I took with me. You learn cooperation, I hope, during graduate studies. A lesson that I think I didn't learn so well was the human spirit of competition as well. I'm a lover, not a fighter, so that was kind of difficult for me to reconcile. But you take all of these things forward with you, and they are with you for life. So it's not just all the, I talked about the guilt and all of that kind of stuff, but no, I mean, a lot of how I transition from one thing to another is predicated on being someone that people trusted and knew how hard I would work, and all of those qualities that are really honed during your PhD years or master's years can help with all of that.
So you're touching on something interesting, and that I'd like to talk about, which is how it is a real opportunity to spend those years in an environment such as university. And you were talking about the skills that we somehow learn and keep then throughout our lives from spending that time doing this project. So my question to you, based on this, would be, what skills that you acquired at university would you say have been your greatest assets in reorienting your career, and which ones have been valued the most by your employers or by your peers in your
right? Yeah, great question. I guess again, there are several different things. I guess I'll touch on three, right? One is the ability to research a topic and become familiar with it very quickly. For example, when you're doing your PhD, some new paper comes out that's very relevant to you in a very specific way, but you need to know a lot more about a different topic in order to fully understand. So, being able to read things and become an expert on, or almost an expert on something overnight kind of thing, the ability to learn and assimilate data quickly, that is an important life skill no matter what you do. It's something that's possibly intangible, but it makes a hell of a difference in every, in the business environment, in any kind of thing. You can get to know a field quickly. Another, I guess, is problem solving, and it's related to the first, right? Coming up with solutions using what you know, to identify what you don't know yet, but also what can you achieve with what you know, right? And that is invaluable in every aspect. I mean, I think that way all the time, right? In even day-to-day work, everything, it can be solved. And I make custom-made computers for people, and they're with very customized parts, and sometimes you have to just solve physical puzzles given the tools and the materials that you have, and this becomes a lot more fun than trying to figure out an experiment that is going to make or break your PhD.
Yeah, no,
So that's the second one, and I guess the third is I guess that it's the human element, right? Is to be someone who is approachable, who gives selflessly, but with the corollary, which I again learned later on in life, is to know when to ask for help. And this is something that, when I was working with graduate students, doing a lot of work at the McGill IPN, working on their well-being and helping them get through their work. We had a careers panel run by Susan Molnar, and one of the first things they did, she did, was ask for a show of hands that how many people out there, when you needed help, would be willing to ask for it. And I guess there were probably about 70 people in this room. Maybe 4 hands went up. And then she turned around and said, if somebody came to you for help, how many of you would be willing to give it, assuming that you could without detriment to yourself? And I'd say 66 out of the 70 went up, and I'm sure the 4 that put their hand up for the first one did as well. Almost everybody. And so that was a huge lesson I learned that day. That I feel that if somebody needs help and I can do it, sure, and it's incredibly fulfilling to do so. Yet I'd always been reluctant to ask for help, and when someone can help, it makes them feel good. Obviously, it's not to be abused, but so now one of the valuable skills that I've taken since my graduate studies is knowing when to help and when to ask for help.
That's a really, really good point you make, and for sure, like a project like a PhD, like a master's, can feel, or can at times be, very solitary. You agree, right? And but it's a feeling. You're in the middle of tens of people around you in the lab, depending on what domain you're working. But I think what you're saying, and tell me if I'm right, is don't believe that you're alone in your project. There's people around you and if the person next to you is not available to help you, the other person in the next on the next desk or on the next bench will. And so I feel that that's an important skill for sure that I hadn't thought about, which is be ready and open to ask for help. It's the show of hands that you talked about is very telling. It's
I'm talking about definitely in the lab, maybe with your professor, but knowing how to ask for help with the right person is also a skill, right, that you have to hone over time. But I'm talking about much more than that. Not just will you change the medium on my cells for me tonight, not just that kind of help, but I'm talking about going to your friends and saying, hey, oh man, I'm really stressed about all the stuff that's going on. I just need to hang out for a little while, need someone to talk to, talk to your parents, talk to anyone that can help in any way. So whether it's how you're feeling, what your schoolwork is demanding of you, whether it's going to an expert in your university about something you don't know about and ask them for help, in any shape or form, not just directly to do with your project, where our lives are more than just our graduate studies.
It's true, and as I remember it, at times you feel that those graduate studies are the be all and end all of your life. That's it. Your life is, and it's kind of an illusion that is forced upon you by the system, but that you can, if you open up with other people like you're suggesting, you can diffuse it and have a healthier outlook on what the project is for you and in the whole span of your grown-up life.
Yeah, absolutely. When we embark on graduate studies, I think nobody has an accurate picture of what it's going to be like. You may know you may know someone who's doing a PhD, and you think, oh, it's going to be different for me. But everyone has a different experience, but nobody really knows exactly what it's going to be like before they start. So you have to be prepared to not know that there is going to be a big unknown, and it's part of the excitement, of course, right? So yeah, just know that you don't know what you're getting into, but it could be great.
Yeah, because in my way of seeing, I feel that science and research is romanticized in a way in the media and the way it's described throughout the different platforms. And you may hop onto a project like that, having in your mind a bunch of examples of successes. You just see the successes. And this touches on the other point that you were mentioning before of, oh, I'm the only one not getting results, and then my benchmates are publishing left and right. And in the end, in the overall, existence of research, the successes are not that many, or let's say what comes out onto the media as a big breakthrough, etc., comes on the shoulders of half successes, failures, and lots of them, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So,
and people should be conscious of that as they embark on the journey, which is a great journey. Even if your result the answer that you find is not as fun, not as striking as you would like or as you would imagine.
Yeah, I mean, I went from academic research to heading a department in a pharmaceutical company and still working on the bench while I was doing that. But the types of experiments we were doing were just to establish data on the drugs that we had developed. What that really meant was these were not exploratory experiments; these were data generating experiments. So I went from 90% failure in academic research, right, to more than 90% success, and the difference was astounding. In a lot of research, you're expected to fail repeatedly and not let that affect your morale. But we are human beings, right? We're supposed to work harder and with even more enthusiasm the more we fail. And there's a word for people like that. That's masochism. And it's very different from the real world. When you're out there, when I finally started doing things that reflected how hard I was working in the success, that was really great. And to take with that the resilience that I developed during academic research, and coupling that with being rewarded for your hard work in an approximately equal amount. You really begin to earn the hard work that you put in, right? You reap the rewards, which you cannot say in research is guaranteed by any means. So the resilience I learned from that experience of, a frequent failure, made me stronger, of course, but it also made me stronger than the average person who never went through that. Right. So, I feel very lucky to have gone through that, although I didn't feel lucky at the time.
Exactly. I identify totally. So it looks like there's a bunch of good things that we bring with us after grad school, and that serve us well, and that make us good workers, good entrepreneurs, resilient people in adult life, which is great. And another little question about university. How do you feel going through university, going through grad school, reflects today in terms of your networking? Do the people you crossed throughout your academic path still somehow now populate your current network?
Yeah. So there are lots of people that I used to see every single day, of course, in graduate studies, whom I don't see very often or speak to very often. But of those, there's a subset that I know that I can always go to, that will always have my back, and vice versa. When it comes to careers advice, or I could go to my friend Dan and say, Dan, I'm looking for a change in career. Do you know of something that might be good for me out there? There's certainly people who are still in academia that I would turn to, and not just for academic advice, not just for academic careers advice, but these days, there's not a professor out there who doesn't have industry links. There's not a professor out there who hasn't looked for sources of funding that combine industry with academic research. So of course, everyone, you should never exclude anyone from your network, really, right? Like, just as I've said, nobody knows what they're getting into when they go into studies, into graduate studies. Nobody knows which person in their network is going to give them that magic ticket that helps you leap to the next step.
Yeah, that's true. I feel the same, and I feel that it's going through university is a great moment to develop your network, because you're in a milieu which is filled with very driven people, with people with many different interests and different strengths, and for sure, for me, I agree with your answer completely, which is it's totally. It totally has a positive effect on the network of people that you know, and that may somehow lead to collaborations or even joint ventures in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a case in point is my postdoctoral professor at the MNI. At first, I really liked him. When I met him, I thought, "Oh, this is great." But soon as I wasn't producing work, and it was really my own issues and faults at the time, our relationship soured a little bit, and then things started to pick up, and I was doing great work, and I got to know him better. And now we have a tremendous amount of respect for each other, and I think he's an amazing person, and he's helped me tremendously over the years. And even though he's not even in the same province and is thousands of kilometers away now, I could pick up the phone and know that he will do his utmost to help. And those are the kind of people and relationships I feel lucky to have.
That's great. No, it's great to hear, and I believe that anyone going through grad school will come out knowing lots of very interesting people, and that can totally be part of their adult life, in terms of, be it collaboration or friendship, like you're saying, and And so it's another positive aspect for me of going through grad school, is that the social aspect. Now I'd like to cover some more practical questions, maybe for our listeners, to do with cultivating yourself. And because I feel that during graduate studies, we can tend to feel that research and academic activities are work we do for others. And we kind of touched on this already, but given the size and duration of these projects, it's easy to forget yourself in the process, especially for students coming from outside who do not have the safety net of family or a close-knit group of friends. So in your experience, what habits or resources have helped you cultivate yourself as an independent person during your studies and come out ready to promote yourself in the job market?
Right. So as for promoting myself, I've never been particularly good at that. And I think a lot of people in graduate school are not so good at that. But that's where, career services and so on can really help you do that. So let's go back to the other part of the question. I think what really helped me was having a broad range of interests outside of my work. Right. And, that really helped because, when, for example, I was really into physical fitness, when I was doing graduate studies as well. And so eventually, while I was doing a postdoc, I was supplementing, my income with personal training. And at one point I was thinking of giving up all of science to actually become someone more involved in physical fitness. You wouldn't think to look at me now, but I even presented at the world's largest health and fitness conference, and combining my science with that. But having hobbies, interests, doing sports, which are all, of course, ways of networking and meeting with people as well. At the time, of course, I wasn't doing any of this with that thought of networking and how it could promote my future career. I don't particularly think that anyone who's doing it just for that purpose is going to be as successful for someone who is just interested in these things. But of course, they all contribute because it gives you something to fall back on, to let off steam, to de-stress. And one of those hobbies has led directly to the business that I'm running right now. So yeah, that's the thing. I come back to this again and again, not to forget yourself. Don't just become a one-trick pony. Your academic studies are very important, possibly more important than most of the things in your life, but you still have a life outside of that. And that can, again, just like networking, you never know when those interests or hobbies are going to open doors for you in very unexpected ways.
Cool. And I feel from what you're saying that somehow it kind of dismantles that feeling of the PhD or the master's is the only thing that matters in my life right now.
Yeah, and look, anyone who feels that, I don't blame them for it. I've been through that, to the point when things are not going well, you're not just despairing for your graduate studies, you despair for your whole life, right? You just think, what am I going to do?
I'm failing, right?
I'm failing,
yeah.
But you're not. You are developing this resilience, the skills that you're going to need out there, no matter what you do, right? And that's a really important message. That it feels like things are not going well, but the more you have in your life at the time, the more doors can open, the more options you have, the more outlets you have to help you deal with what the biggest thing in your life at that time, which is your graduate studies. It's big, but it's not all.
So would you say that the way to take a positive out of this, especially when you're in the eye of the tornado, let's say, is there's these fears, there's these obstacles, and this is not as easy as I had envisioned it, but I'm going to come out of this stronger?
Yeah. Again, when you're in the eye of the storm, you don't know that, right? And I think this is why your podcast and other media that can help open people's eyes to that fact that it will get better. I am getting stronger. It's not all despair. How do you turn that moment of darkness into um, being able to see that silver lining on the cloud? How do you take that negative thought and turn it into the most positive? You can do that in retrospect.
Yeah, it's easier.
Right. But if you can just accept, and this is going back to submission, if you can just submit away from the feeling that everything is doom and gloom, and just believe that all these people are saying it gets better, and you're learning, and if you can just take that on board, if it can provide some strength to you, that is, that's a very worthy thing to have happen. It's like when you become a parent, right? Nobody's ready to become a parent, right? And so when everyone says, "Oh, yeah, it's the best thing in my life," and you just think, "No, no, 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 no way! I'm not ready. I'm not ready," and then you just submit to it when it happens, hopefully planned, and then that's what I'm saying. That if you graduate students listening to this can realize that you are developing things and skills and strengths that you might not be able to see right now. That's a very important message I'd like to make sure people can take on board.
It's happening even though you're not noticing it.
Yes, absolutely.
Quickly about this how do you say, cultivating yourself, and I know that you said that promoting yourself, and I agree. Apart from some events that were promoted by the career and placement department, I don't remember having any training or anything like that about promoting oneself, especially in the academic domain. And it might be, or it is important in today's world for sure. But my point that I was going to ask is, did you have people that were pivotal at someone that you would consider a mentor that was pivotal during this path of going through academia, doing postdocs, etc., and then finding your current career path?
Right. In terms of mentors, unfortunately, I would say no. And that goes back to the how many people want to ask for help and how many people. So at that time, I'd be mortified to ask for help. Right at that earlier on in my career. Now I understand the value of it, and I understand the value of the message that it sends. If you ask someone for help, it shows that you do not think that you are completely invincible. It adds a touch of humanity to you, which actually makes potential employers think more highly of you than someone who just wants to think that they can do it themselves. But later on in my career transitions, there were people who I considered friends or former employers, that have helped tremendously, put in a good word, made a recommendation. And sometimes I get people reaching out to me now because of something that someone said. So the director of the IPN in my career, we got along very well and we worked super hard together. She went and told someone, "Oh, Joe is finishing his MBA soon. He would be great for this position." And they reached out to me, and it was true. It would be exactly the sort of thing that I would have loved to have done a few years ago. And so, I have people that I know that, again, I could reach out to for mentorship, for help. But these all came, as a result of prior experience and networking. etc. Yeah. So, but mostly I had to go it alone. I'm fortunate in that I'm not Canadian. I have an accent that people makes people want to just hear what I have to say. And then, fortunately, by some crazy coincidence, the things that come out of my mouth sometimes paint a good picture of me. That's about as much self-promotion as I can manage.
That's funny. Well, you do very well for yourself, and you're. It's a pleasure to be talking with you. And now actually I'm at my last question, which is kind of trying to give some advice to the listeners. And the question is, I'm going to ask you to imagine that you're standing in front of an audience full of young finalists or young graduates, people just like you when you finished your studies. And they're struggling. They're struggling through fears, worries, doubts, and obstacles to find their place in the job market, to trace their journey towards a productive and fulfilling life. So, what 2 or 3 basic strategies or principles could our listeners follow starting today to put in place a realistic and attainable transition project to their life in the workplace, in the work market?
Right. Well, firstly, I think one of the things that everyone should think about is there are a lot of people out there who have been through graduate studies who are not working in academic subjects now, right? They went into academia thinking that that's what they would do, that they would be academics later on. The reality didn't work out. Very few of those people are homeless or living below the poverty line, right? That should just tell you something, right? That you are employable, you are likable, you are going to be okay, and you shouldn't let those thoughts of, oh my god, my world is collapsing around me, what am I going to do? Everyone should have an idea of what they want to do or should be developing such an idea, but you shouldn't be mortified and worried about that, right? So that's just the first thing I wanted to get off my chest. So that's your fears and worries. At the same time, of course, you don't just say, oh yeah, everything's going to be all right, nobody's homeless, blah blah blah. You still have to work towards it, and that's where the specific advice, I think, comes in. One thing to remember is the world is driven by money, but that's reality, and that's one of the things that I think doing the MBA was invaluable to me. Now I feel that every person, not just academic, everyone should have a knowledge of finance and money. We get into academics not thinking about these things, and we think that we'll never need to think about these things, but we all do, right? So that's one thing, is learn how the world really works. I think that's super important, because that sets a backdrop. You might be in your 20s now, one day you're not, one day you're going to have a family, and you're going to need to know about these things, and know about the people who run the world, what their motivations are, and how you can live a life that is both morally correct, but at the same time not a way, in a way that you're not playing the game and always going to be in poverty, right? So learn about finances is one thing that's really important. The other thing is that money drives the world. Yes, that's true, but there are always people behind it. Right. You'll see that countries have policies, but those policies are executed by people, and people make those policies. So your relationships with people, I think, are the number one thing for me in the whole world, right? Is in your whole life, is the relationships you make, and you are not you've got this karma bank, I guess, that you can feed into. But in general, those people can be future mentors. They can be people who will help you go to the next step. They can be people that you can just hang out with to relieve stress, or you can be the person. They could be people that you can help. right, in the future, which will help you tremendously internally, just knowing that you did something useful. So your relationships with people, I think, are paramount. And of course, you're not going to get along with everyone, but being very aware of how you present yourself, how you come across. And I'm not saying that if you're an introvert, you're doomed, or if you're not a gregarious person, you're not going to get anywhere. That's not at all true. If you have one or two close relationships with people, that could be, that could be all it takes to get further in your lives. So, so what that means to me is looking to grow constantly. And I'll be honest, a lot of the stuff that I would now advise is because I didn't do those things, because I learned from my mistakes, right? And some of these things I still struggle with. Maybe, they're beyond my capability, but they may not be beyond all your other people's. But is to look at how are you growing? Are you at peace with yourselves? Because that's what anyone who sees you can pick up on. We have very strong intuitions, but are you still learning stuff? I thought I've got a PhD, I'm an intelligent person, but when I was doing my MBA, I realized that if you're not studying something quite rigorously, you don't feel especially, of course, I was in my late 40s doing my MBA as well, but you don't your mind does begin to stagnate. So keep learning, because after a year of my MBA, I felt I was 20 years younger mentally. Again, my agility came back, and that was great. It was a great feeling. So I would say just keep learning, no matter what it is. Do a Coursera course, learn about extraterrestrial life, if there's a course on the search for extraterrestrial life, or learn about anything. I think that's really important. And again, every opportunity increases your network. So relationships, keep learning, and think about what somebody else sees when they look at you.
Those are very, very important points, and so what I'm getting from that is, you, with your PhD or your master's, you became a very specialized learner. So now you have a license to learn. That's what I'm understanding. And so now you don't want to stay in academia anymore. Well, you're more than you have more than the skills to learn something that interests you and learn it very well. So go do it, and become someone with even more knowledge and more skills.
Yes, there is that, but also just learning for the sake of it. It helps your mind stay active, young, and I think just makes you a more attractive person, because your mind is agile.
It's agile. Good.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, Joe, I think our time is over. Thank you so much for taking the time to come do this interview with me. It's been a pleasure. I think we touched on many important points. I think this definitely will help a lot of people, a lot of the listeners. I hope maybe sometime I'll have you on again to speak about some specific points that we may have just brushed this time.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to tell you how I got into the job that I'm doing now. It's an incredible story, so maybe another time.
Excellent. Probably another episode then. Well, thank you so much, and we'll talk soon then.
Okay, thank you, David.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Beyond the Thesis with Papa PhD, with me, David Mendez, and my guest, Joe Makkerh. If this conversation resonated with you, you can be sure it will resonate with someone else. And future you will need great colleagues. So share to start the butterfly effect. And if you really, really liked it, take a minute or two to leave a comment or a review on whichever platform you're using to listen to me at this moment. Other than buying me a coffee or jumping on the Patreon, it's one of the best ways you can support me as a podcaster. Looking forward to reading you.